What in the world is going on between Iowa State and Kansas State? We're going to talk all about that and talk a little Big 12 hoops with the one and only John Kurtz. And we're going to do that right after this word from our sponsor.
This episode of Hoops on the Hills is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time.
With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for.
Come and check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today in person to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you.
What is up? This is Couz.
And my name is Mountaineer Paul.
And we present to you a special edition of
Hoops from the Hills.
What's going on? Mountaineer Paul and Couz back with another episode. Today we're bringing on a very special guest, Mr. John Kurtz. Most of you know him. What's up, John?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us a minute.
Hey, no problem, man. Always happy to do it.
Real quick,
Absolutely.
I'm sure all of our listeners, or at least most of them, know who you are and where to find you. But just in case, go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know what you have going on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So on YouTube, just search my name, John Kurtz, JohnKurtz. I'm always doing Big 12 content, live shows on Wednesdays and Sunday nights, and get you some other videos as well throughout that. And then if you are a K-State fan, I co-host a podcast called 3MA on KC Sports Network. You can find that wherever you find podcasts. Just search for 3MA, EMA, EMAW, but with a 3 instead. And you can follow me on Twitter at JLKurtz too.
Awesome. And we do have his Twitter handle scrolling along the bottom, along with ours. If you guys want to come chat with us and hit us up on Twitter or X or whatever it's called today. All right, let's dig in. First thing we want to talk about, John, is your favorite topic, man. We know it's the whole Iowa State, K-State situation, I guess you could call it, controversy, whatever. Can you just fill us in on exactly what happened?
Yeah, it's been quite the last, I guess we're at 36 hours, 48 hours. The game was on Wednesday, 48 hours by this point. It was, first of all, a really hotly contested game. You just had tempers flaring a lot of ways. K-State got down by double digits early. They were down double digits at the half. Not really playing very well, but they came out much better in the second half, shot the lights out. Similar in that way, kind of to what they did to Texas Tech, where they started really slow and then got hot shooting the ball, surged in front. Here, though, they never built a big lead. It was a pretty close game headed toward the stretch run. And then at the under 8 media timeout, right? There was like 7:40-ish left on the clock officially. Under 8 media timeout, you're coming back out from the timeout, and the TV cameras show that Jerome Tang came out and he was trying to get TJ Otzelberger, Iowa State's head coach, and Jerry Pollard, the lead official, to meet with him, kind of like huddle up at midcourt. And no one was really sure exactly what was going on at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And TJ Otzelberger reacted by going berserk and trying to get Tang at least a warning for being out of the coach's box, which is because that had happened to Otzelberger earlier in the game when he was arguing some foul calls. Otzelberger had received a warning already in that game, so he wanted no part of trying to have a conversation. I think maybe before he even heard him out, he went straight to, hey, this guy just did what I did and got a warning for. Mm-hmm. So that's really where it all starts, and that was like a very weird moment, and Iowa State fans had already become very upset early on in the half about some foul calls, and that had seemingly started to turn the tide on how the game was being officiated, and so they had been really riled up already. The game starts to change. K-State was called for a foul on 8 straight possessions and 9 possessions out of 10. So did their job, Hilton Magic. And then you have that moment where you've got Otzelberger going nuts as Jerome Tang is trying to kind of approach him on the sideline. And so the crowd was at this point really lathered up in a fury. Mm-hmm. And one thing I'll throw in at that time is everyone's trying to figure out, no one's really sure what was going on there. And Chris Williams, who covers Iowa State for Cyclone Fanatic, put out a tweet that said, hey, I don't know exactly what's going on here, but a K-State assistant just walked up to 2 managers for Iowa State who were sweeping the floor out in front of the bench and pointed at him and said, cheating mother bleepers. And So he put that out there on Twitter, and that was kind of, and everyone's like, all right, what is going on here? But then the game continues. There were a couple more controversial calls toward the end of the game. One was that K-State defender Dorian Finister took an elbow to the face right as Jerry Pollard was looking at a fan in the stands and just missed it. It never got reviewed. That was in a tight one-possession game. Then there was you can call it what you want. I'm not going to use referees as an excuse. I mean, K-State lost the game. They had plenty of chances. But there was a call that did not go their way with David Gasson. About 2 minutes left in a two-possession game, and Jerome Tang got called for a technical. He didn't say anything. He just kind of flung his arm up in the air, like did one of these if you're watching on YouTube, and got hit with a technical, which seemed a little bit weak as well, but also just got the crowd into a total frenzy, right? So I paint this picture for you just to say that tensions were really high throughout the game, and it was a very very like emotionally charged game by the time he got to the end of it. And it was down to the last 2 minutes. It was a 2-possession game, and then it blew up. Actually down to the last 2 minutes, it was a 2-point game. And then when you had the technical lobbed on and already a personal foul, Iowa State getting a bunch of free throws, then they pushed the lead out and they wind up covering and winning by 11. But it was a 2-point game down to the last 2 minutes. So very close. So then after the game, the TV cameras pick up Jerome Tang's handshake with TJ Otzelberger, where he is very upset and, borderline yelling, very sternly talking to TJ Otzelberger, and motion, like points toward the bench at a couple points. It looked like he kind of was almost looking like he was pointing toward like a cell phone at one point there. And Otzelberger kind of just stood there like stone faced, like he didn't really know what to do. So the cameras clearly picked that up. They go to the post-game press conference. Neither coach comments on it. Both like completely took the high road. Otzelberger said, hey, I'm not going to talk about, some things need to stay between coaches. Paraphrasing there. And then Tang was just like, hey, I love TJ, no issue there, but we just had a conversation. I'm going to leave it at that. Yeah. Did not want to answer any questions. Now in between there, I will say, and my part in this, and I hate that I did this. It was a mistake on my part, but the people that were there, eyewitnesses, were seeing K-State coaches like point at the bench. And so the assumption was by a lot of people that were there that were then relaying it to folks like me. And I mean, I should have not run with it on Twitter the way that I did, but I'm not a journalist. I'm a fan, and there's a responsibility that comes with having a following. I should have been more mature about it, but I was fired up as a fan. And so the assumption people had made was like, hey, that something was thrown at the bench. That was what the word was from some people who were there at the time.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing that on social media.
Yeah, that had been like thrown at the bench. So I actually tweeted that out mainly because I wanted to make the point that, hey, this is so animated at midcourt right now after the game because Tang is pissed that TJ wouldn't meet him during the game. That was really the point that I wanted to get across. I just used hey, fans were throwing shit there because that's what had been going around and would have been relayed to me, which, again, I should have had better discretion there. But Tang was really mad that he didn't meet with him during the game, and so he's really taking it out there post-game. Well, then the next, 12 to 24 hours, you're hearing all sorts of stuff. I won't even get into some of the rumors because they're totally unfair to Iowa State fans, but there were rumors of that. Obviously, people throwing stuff. And then you did start to hear, people legitimately saying, hey, K-State was, concerned about Iowa State, snooping on their huddle. And so I went from being like, that seems a little far-fetched to wait, there was that Chris Williams tweet, and that would certainly seem to sync up with that. And then finally, really legitimate source was able to relay to our crew on the podcast that was the issue. Now, there are a million ways you can go with this. I know Trilly Donovan, I was reading a piece from him today where he outlined a lot of stories that were anonymous from people who had worked in college basketball where stuff like this had gone on, and that was their specific job. So, we're kind of back into the Michigan thing, right?
Wow.
How, is this really against the rules? Is this something everyone's doing, whatever? But yeah, basically the deal is, I think it was, and this, a lot of details thrown around. I don't know what specifically is true here. People have talked about students being planted or managers being planted behind the bench.
Somebody in a security guard outfit or something.
I don't know about that. I just heard student managers being planted behind the bench. There were also guys that were out there sweeping over on that end of the floor. And I think the idea was that they would be relaying information via text message quickly back to the huddle, whatever it was that they were gleaning. I know Kellis Robinette's report, so he actually did go ahead and report it from the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle. Like there's a real journalist who was actually involved here who did go ahead and put out that report, and he had mentioned that possibly even recording what was going on in the huddle. So he put his name by that. I had not specifically heard the recording piece of it. So I don't know what the specific actions were, but the general idea is, yes, they thought that Iowa State had some managers out there in some form or fashion snooping on their huddle and using that to try and create some sort of advantage. And, you know, if you want to say, hey, what's the advantage? I mean, look, it was like a 1-possession game down to the last 2 minutes. So if it helped them on an inbound play, if it helped them defend one set, you know, I mean, I would argue that there is definitely a competitive advantage there, but I have no idea how rampant it actually is in college basketball. If there are like specific rules being broken there, I don't know. I'm frankly, if Jerome Tang was that upset about it, he's a man that I respect and is a man of principle. And I'm surprised that he did that with 7 minutes left in a really tight basketball game to try and make that point to do it. But if he felt that strongly about it, he kind of gets the benefit of the doubt from me that there's probably, you know, something that really shouldn't be going on there. I do think that they may have had a suspicion about it going into the game, that there had been sort of a reputation out there for TJ Otzelberger with this, and they maybe got some suspicions confirmed. I think that may have played a role in it too. But beyond that, I don't really care so much about the argument of like what the advantage is. I'm not saying TJ Otzelberger should be suspended or burned at the stake or anything like that. I just, that is the situation. That is basically the situation that we have. I don't know that the K-State coaches really wanted it to get out publicly, but it is. And here we are, and here we sit.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for that explanation.
So, awesome explanation, first of all. Thank you. So would you consider this a gamesmanship type thing that goes on possibly in college basketball, and maybe the coaches were upset, like, you brought this crap to the rivalry. We get that you do this maybe against some team that you don't have any kind of tradition with or history with, but you're doing this during the rivalry, which may be the best time to do it. I don't know. And have you looked back over the game footage to see if during those pivotal plays and moments, did Iowa State seem extra keen on what was going on, or were they just clued in all game?
That's actually a really good point and question to the latter part of that. I have not done that. I should check with Cole Manbeck, who does the 3 Mile podcast with me, because he's always going back and rewatching games to see what he thinks about it. And I guess that's a part of where I come down on the, like, hey, there is yes, let's move on. There is a certain element of gamesmanship, and I just don't, you know, I'm not super interested in sitting there and like whining about. And I know the reputation, somewhat well deserved on social media right now for K-State fans, is that there's been a lot of that, because at the end of the Texas Tech game, I mean, Joe Toussaint did clearly travel on the game-winning shot that he hit in Lubbock to beat K-State. But that was a game where K-State blew an 8-point lead with about 3 minutes left. So again, I'm not really interested in saying that was the reason that they lost, but there's been a ton of that. And so I'm trying to distance a little bit from it in that regard. But to the first part of the question, like, it's hard to know what the gamesmanship, like, is it just gamesmanship that happens all the time? Is this something that people would legitimately be really upset about it? Again, I just come back to the thing. I will give K-State some benefit of the doubt and just say I would be very curious to know, like, the full story, all the details of it, what it was that triggered them to be upset enough at that point in the game to, you know, it's the under 8 timeout. You're coming down the home stretch of a game where your guys, I mean, K-State played a gritty game. I was, you know, if you would have just told me from when it started and they're down like 12 in the first half, not looking good at all, tough place to play, that they were going to be within 2 with 2 minutes to go, I would have said, hell yeah. I continue to be impressed that this team, which is so much better than the sum of its parts, is still finding ways to be that competitive against teams this good on the road in the Big 12. I'm still very surprised by that. So you've got your team, point being, playing like that kind of a game and giving that kind of an effort, and you're going to try and go talk about this with TJ Otzelberger and the official in the middle of the game. I mean, one thing that cameras did kind of pick up that you could go back and see now is, I know some have said, like, it looked like Tang was trying to call over Jerry Pollard, who's the lead official there, and it looked like he was saying something at that point about, like, hey, they've got 2 guys over here with cell phones or something like that. So I believe that was, and this is where I should probably be a little more careful with this, but people on social media have gone back and tried to do the lip reading thing and seeing some of that. But he very clearly was trying to get that covered and taken care of, or whatever you want to say, in the middle of the game. And so for that to happen, I mean, Tang's no dummy. He's a really good coach. I would think that there's got to be something there, probably more than meets the eye to just like regular gamesmanship. But I don't have official confirmation on like what exactly that is, or why it set them off to that point to do it at that point in the game. And I suppose the possibility does just exist that tempers flare in the middle of a game. They got really upset about it, maybe had a sneaking suspicion about it going into the game, and just felt like, hey, we're really upset about it right now. Let's just go get it taken care of. And it was heat of the moment that took over there. Don't know. But I think those are all things that probably have to be considered here when you're thinking about it.
That's fair.
Yep. So outside of that, and I appreciate you for saying that, sharing that story with us with all that, and completely understand where your positioning is as far as your following and everything like that, how sometimes you forget about something like that. I've had people get on to me for certain things before too. I don't have quite the largest following as you, but there is responsibility that comes with it. So overall, though, how do you feel about this K-State team? Obviously, the Tomlin news was devastating to all involved. Seems like he loved K-State, and if he had his druthers, he would be in Manhattan, excuse me. But he's not. He's in Memphis. And like you said, yet this team continues to win. Although the Iowa State loss stings and you're ready to move on to a new one. Still a good basketball team. We certainly have seen up close and personal, and I think you guys, the gritty is the word.
They are gritty, defensive-minded. They have to lean on that because they've lost a lot of scoring punch from last year. I mean, look, two All-Americans, you knew that was going to be tough to recover from with Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson. But the real thing that's hurt this team is that, you see how well they're playing right now, at least well enough to be a tournament team with this roster. And like, dude, RaeQuan Tomlin has had some moments of looking very good. He, this offseason, got back into the first round feedback from the NBA, I think was perhaps a little bit closer toward going than some may have anticipated entering the process. And then they also, one of the things, speaking of Joe Toussaint, they had a shot at Joe Toussaint, right? He was ready to commit basically to K-State. Texas Tech came in with a bigger offer at the last moment. Yeah, big bag. And K-State gave Jerome Tang like the green light. If you want to do it, you can go get him. Tang is pretty principled about not wanting to get into bidding wars and didn't want to do that and said, hey, that's fine. So they passed on it. Joe Toussaint would be really helpful to this team right now. But they got Couz Glover instead, who was at one time committed to BYU, had an NIL hang up there, decided not to go there. So they get him, and I think he was a guard that could have really helped them out. He was going to be their sixth man, somebody that could play some point and allow Tyler Perry to be off the ball, which that's one of the issues this team's having right now is Tyler Perry's not really a point guard. He's having to play like 30-plus minutes a game at point guard because they don't have many other options. He's a shooter, and he is one of the most deadly shooters in the country if he gets rolling. But he's having to do so much with ball handling and not being able to just snipe shots that it's really limited how much he's able to bomb threes. If Couz Glover's around there, that would change things. Unfortunately, he's had 2 meniscus injuries with his knee this year, and he played like a couple minutes in the first exhibition game of the year. They waited about 8 weeks to try and bring him back, and literally as they're ramping him up to come back for a game that week, has the same issue again in practice. So I don't believe he's going to play this year. So they've had that, and obviously the RaeQuan Tomlin situation, which has been discussed ad nauseum here. But Tang and Gene Taylor both signed off on him being able to come back. So did the university president at one point. After a first incident happens, second incident happens, that's the bar fight. Then the president doesn't want him to play. Tang and K-State athletic director Gene Taylor both did want him to play. There was a lot of friction there. President wins out. He's gone. Now he's playing for Memphis. You had schools lining up right away to have him play. And I will say, it's like you look around the country, like Terrence Shannon's playing for Illinois right now. Pop Isaacs is playing for Texas Tech. It's a little wild to me that RaeQuan Tomlin's not playing for K-State, but it is what it is. So you've lost 2 really high-level players from that team. And that's a long roundabout way of saying I don't really know how they're doing this, especially after they went through the non-con playing all sorts of close games against bad teams in these bye games in the non-con. I mean, they won by single digits against Chicago State right before conference play in a game that did not look good at all. They were in overtime with North Alabama. They were in overtime with Oral Roberts. They did find a way to win both of those games, but there's just been nothing really impressive about them in the non-con outside of a couple bright spots. Villanova, they got up and beat in overtime. And then really South Dakota State, they played a pretty nice game, but those moments are few and far between. They did not look like a good team going into league play at all. And they came out and ripped off wins in 4 of the first 5 before losing to Iowa State. And you can argue definitely should have won that game in Lubbock too, blowing an 8-point lead with 3 minutes left. So they're just doing it by defending the hell out of people, starting to get really good performances from Cam Carter, who I think is one of the most improved players in the league. He was just a role guy last year, didn't score it much. He's scoring it a lot now. He's a great two-way player. He can really defend. And Arthur Kaluma is probably turning into the best player on the team right now. He's become a knockdown shooter from the outside, which has been sorely needed because Tyler Perry has really struggled and hovered around 30% from 3 all year, which the expectation I think was for him to be more like a 40% 3-point shooter. So that's basically it. They're kind of, Tang has done I think a really masterful coaching job with this group so far to get every single thing that he can out of them. We'll see moving forward. They've got some really talented freshmen in RJ Jones and Day-Day Ames. They weren't expecting to count on them this early, top 150, top 100 recruits, both top 100 actually recruits from last year. Having moments starting to come along. I think the hope would be by the end of the year, they're not playing like freshmen anymore and maybe have a little bit more punch off the bench too. But right now they're just kind of getting by, MacGyvering this thing, but doing a pretty good job of it. Good
deal. Do you think, I haven't looked at the latest projections yet, latest bracketologies, but are they projected to get into the tournament at this point?
Yeah, the last I saw a couple things today. I saw one had them in a play-in game. I don't remember if that was Palm or Lenardi. They've just been, they have the little section, last 4 in, or next 4 in, last 4 in, whatever, first 4 out, next 4 out. I mean, they've been living on that for a couple of weeks now. So it's going to be you'll find them somewhere in there. I mean, they are like squarely on the bubble. The problem for K-State right now, they do not have a bad loss. They do not have a quad 3 or quad 4 loss. They've got a quad 1 win against Baylor. I believe actually, at least as of yesterday, Providence, I think, had moved to a quad 1 win. It was Providence or Villanova. One of those that they have in the non-con had moved into a quad 1, but it's teetering on the edge. So they've got 1, maybe 2 quad 1 wins. They've got no bad losses. The thing that hurts them with the metrics in the net and the KenPom is I mentioned all those games they played that were in overtime. Like they've had so many close wins, and the metrics reward you for blowing teams out, which, we can debate the merits of that, but it is the reality. And so the advanced metrics don't love them very much because they've had so many close wins. So that is holding them back with some of those computer numbers right now.
From a K-State person's point of view, and I know you keep your eye on the rest of the league, and maybe you don't know to the extent of which, but have you ever seen a program endure an off season and a regular season like West Virginia has? I truly believe if you went through the history of college basketball, you might find maybe half a dozen teams that have been a snake bitten from Bob Huggins until now. We still haven't played with all our starters in one game yet. It's incredible. I think we listed off 13 or 14 things that would be considered moderate to major things that have happened to us since Bob Huggins left.
Well, I think I would suggest that it probably is tops on that list because, I mean, we're in such a unique climate right now with the transfer portal and everything that's happening. Like that has not existed before. So I think when you throw all of that in, it probably does verify your point there that you're making with it. And so, yeah, it's been wild, man. I mean, and then injuries too, I mean, you throw in injuries once the season started. It's not just the 2-time transfer thing. Yeah. Which has been wild. And you get a court ruling that helps the guys all of a sudden be eligible midseason. It was already going to be hard. The thing for West Virginia is like, and K-State's learned this. Everyone's learning this. That feels like they have great portal halls. I thought K-State had a really good portal hall, but you also have to get guys integrated, and I think that's the part we forget sometimes. Like everyone gets really sidetracked by the eye candy of like, oh, this guy's like really high up in the portal. This is going to be great. We'll just plug and play. But you do have to develop a lot of chemistry within the team too. And we kind of just breeze on past that. And there are varying degrees of results. I mean, look at like Arkansas dominates the portal every year, and Arkansas is really struggling this year. So teams do have issues with that. So I think you were already going to have a challenge with that, point being with West Virginia. And then when you have all the other wrenches that get thrown into it, with guys not being able to play until a certain point in the season, and then having an injury, or multiple injuries, all of that stuff throws it all off. And I feel like K-State experienced that to a much lesser degree, where it wasn't even all injuries. Obviously, some of it was, but then you have the Tomlin suspension, and then you had Arthur Kaluma got suspended, not suspended, but they held him out for a game because he wasn't buying in the way they want to. So there were all these clunky things. So I just have empathy for West Virginia fans because I saw it on a smaller level with K-State, where it was like, man, they have not developed any cohesion here through this non-con, because one guy's out because they're mad at him at some point. One guy's suspended. They've got another injury. So they never really seemed to develop it throughout the non-con too. It's a very difficult tightrope to walk. And honestly, I mean, K-State could have lost a couple of those overtime games that would have been quad 3, quad 4 losses, and this would be feeling much different than it does right now. So it's a pretty fine line. And then, obviously you got a guy who's first time head coach, and Josh Eilert, who I really like. I will, obviously he's a K-State guy. And so I've known about Josh Eilert for a long time. I remember watching him play back in the days when I'm, no offense, Josh, those teams were not very good at all when he was playing at K-State. But Josh, I always respect him because in 2012, so I started working full-time in 2011, covering K-State, and I did 10 years of doing that, and I traveled with football. So 2012, we're in Morgantown for that game, and we were hanging out the day before, and Matt Walters, who's the K-State sideline reporter who I was there with doing pregame with, he was like, hey, if you have some time, we may get a chance to tour the basketball facilities and just everything at West Virginia. And I was like, well, hell yeah, that'd be sweet. And we get up there, and it was Josh who took us around, and it was because Matt knew Josh from back in the day at K-State. Gotcha. And Josh Eilert was like, hey man, no, you can come tour everything. He took us around. I remember seeing Hugs, he just took us around to get a look at everything. And it was that was a cool memory that I had early on, because that was my first trip out to Morgantown. So I've always really liked Josh Eilert since then. So I'm pulling for him, man. I wish nothing but the best for that guy, and definitely respect how rough of a situation in off season that's been in Morgantown in general.
Yeah, it's been hard to watch.
Yeah, it has. And I think everybody's rooting for Josh, man. Honestly, it's just, the deck's been stacked against him so bad. And I just, with the whole Huggins thing kind of looming out there, where he was on Huggins' staff for so long, I think, to me, as long as he's there, you're always going to kind of have that Huggins shadow to a degree. But you can't ask for a nicer guy. You can't ask for a guy who loves, I mean, he's obviously embraced West Virginia now because he's been here for over 15 years or so, whatever the number is. So he has become a, quote, West Virginia guy, right? Because he's been here so long. But it was really cool, John, to switch gears a second, when West Virginia beat Kansas the other night. And they asked Josh what was the first thing that went through his mind. Did you see this before
I don't think I did. No.
It was his post-game presser, and it was a really cool story he told about how he said the first thing I thought of was my dad, because my entire family are K-State grads. And my dad absolutely hated Kansas. He despised Kansas with everything in him. So him beating Kansas as a coach was like the super, you could tell he was extremely proud of what he had just done because of his dad. And I thought that was just a cool story.
Man, that's cool as hell. I'm glad you told me that. I had not heard that, but that totally makes sense. I mean, he's a small town Kansas boy. So, and generally, the makeup of Kansas, now, stereotype, and obviously it doesn't hold true all the time, but in small town Kansas, it's obviously going to skew more toward the ag stuff, which is, you're going to have a strong K-State lean there, as opposed to get to the Kansas City area, Wichita, Topeka, some of the bigger quote unquote metro areas. I know some would scoff at that, but as much as you get in Kansas, that's where you have the big Kansas contingent, right? And so, where he's from, man, I mean, you're getting a lot of guys with K-State in their blood, for sure there. And, I would add the other thing too that's probably significant to him is like I said, those teams really struggled. I believe he played, I don't remember if it was Asbury or Woldridge or maybe both, but it was in that time period. Both of those guys had some big time struggles at K-State, and they did not have much luck at all against Kansas. I mean, there was, how did it get to like 20? What was the streak at when Michael Beasley finally ended it? They went like 20 plus years without beating Kansas at home.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was, there were some rough times there, and he was right in the thick of it. So I would imagine there has to be a lot of just personal vindication for him from that standpoint too.
You know, I thought it was cool that he was so honest about it, you know?
Yeah. I love it.
Did you know the story about him living on an Indian reservation for a while?
No, see, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, during the whole RaeQuan battle. Well, Paul, you can probably tell it better than I can. But the whole RaeQuan.
Well, obviously, RaeQuan Battle lived on an Indian reservation his entire life, basically. Played at Montana State. He was a highly regarded recruit coming out of high school, 4-star kid. Obviously, transferred from Washington. It was too big for him to Montana State. The entire time, he's got this entire reservation full of kids that are counting on him, and to an extent, I think counting on him to possibly hit it big so that he can support them in different avenues and ways. And, you know, and they look up to him. So whenever he transferred this last time, they couldn't get the NCAA, of course, couldn't wrap their head around why he chose West Virginia. It's like, to them, it was like, if you're transferring because of mental health, West Virginia seems like the last place you would go, being that you're from an Indian reservation. And they kept explaining to them, well, it's because this coach, Josh Eilert, also grew up on an Indian reservation. And so they had this connection. But the NCAA still denied RaeQuan Battle in light of all that. And Josh Eilert spent a long time on the resume. It wasn't just like he was there for a month. He spent a few years of his life there. So that's why they took him to court, because just you would think any sane person would see that connection and say, okay, that makes sense. You know, and they had a bunch of other evidence too as to why RaeQuan needed basketball. So, you know, it was a crazy situation. It just made things harder that they had to go to court to do it. Luckily, what's funny is technically it was only supposed to be West Virginia that this happened because it was at the state level, but the NCAA knew they would just end up right back in court, and so they made it a national thing, which is why anybody was able to transfer, which is kind of cool. I don't know if everybody knows that or not, but I always like to throw that in. Yeah,
well, I mean, look, we know that, first of all, the NCAA House of Cards is just crumbling on them right now anyway. And they've been short on common sense with those things for a long time. I mean, that's like, it just feels like so many of their decisions have always been so out of touch. And that's why they are where they're at, like, because they never wanted to just evolve gradually with the sport and the economics of the sport and try to bring along some of these, getting the players a cut, finding a way for them to make a little money. We could have done this gradually and been much more controlled. Instead, they fought it until the dam broke, and now we had the environment that we're in. And I think that the RaeQuan Battle situation is just like a minor microcosm of what their whole history has been like here, where it's like, I mean, look, that should be, yes, like a situation where you can just apply some common sense there and utilize this kind of one-off case in a different way than maybe you would for a different situation. But you know, it is what it is. I'm just glad the guy's able to play now. And I always feel, you know, I mean, this is a silly reason to feel that way, but I always I have a little extra. I like RaeQuan Battle because I remember watching him. He played K-State in the tournament last year at Montana State.
Right.
And I remember learning about him and then watching him play, and he had a nice game. Like the dude can definitely fill it up. He can score. So, shoot, I mean, you know, I was interested in him when he first hit the portal too. And I wondered if K-State would pursue him very much at all. So he's just one of those guys that's like been on my radar. So I definitely root for him too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Appreciate you for coming on, man.
Yeah, absolutely,
man. To us.
Yeah.
No problem, guys.
We want to hear it straight from somebody who's, you know, closer to the situation than we are, because all we see is what's on Twitter and pretty much, and sometimes that's not always accurate. So
no, for sure. Well, I mean, hell, unfortunately, I was a part of that this week.
Well, we've all done it. Trust me. I've had to delete a lot of tweets.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, and thank you, boys, for beating Kansas, man. I was sitting there. Sitting there at Manhattan Brewing Company before the K-State game on Saturday, watching that one. The entire place was. So we definitely appreciated seeing that.
And the cool thing
wasn't that a good game?
Great game. Yes. Great one to watch.
The cool thing is we don't play them again, so they don't have a chance to get redemption. So
Love it. Love those unbalanced schedules, baby.
Yeah.
Avoiding Allen Fieldhouse. That's living right.
Let's go.
One more time, John, before we get out of here, man, just tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, so YouTube, it's just my name, John Kurtz, JohnKurtz. The live shows on Wednesdays and Sundays are a really good time. We get a lot of Big 12 fans in there. And then if you are a K-State fan, you want K-State specific content, we do a podcast called 3MAW, 3MAW, just wherever it is that you find podcasts, you can search there. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz.
Awesome. Thanks, John. We appreciate it, man. And Paul, thanks to you for setting it up.
Yeah, no problem.
Anytime, guys. Take care.
Yeah, appreciate you tuning in. We're done.